The two billionaires were separated by nothing but a waitress translating their contract. Maya held a $600 million deal in her hands and a whispered bribe in her ear. The Arab magnate promised her a fortune if she twisted the Israelis' terms. She had seconds to choose, betray her conscience or risk it all. What she did next exposed the cheat, rewrote the negotiation, and forever changed her own life. Maya was not supposed to be anywhere near billion-dollar negotiations. A 24-year-old linguistics graduate from Beirut, she worked double shifts at Dubai's most exclusive restaurant to pay for her mother's cancer treatments. She spoke 4 languages fluently: Arabic, Hebrew, French, and English, a skill set that caught Mr. Al-Rashid's attention when he needed a translator for his meeting with an Israeli rival. It was supposed to be simple: translate the terms, nothing else. But then the whisper came, and Maya realized that her integrity was the real currency on the table. Because what she didn't know was that this single decision would expose a deception that stretched far beyond that restaurant. To understand what happened in that restaurant, you have to understand the 3 forces that collided there. First, a young woman carrying the weight of a dying mother on her back. Second, 2 billionaires who had spent decades trying to destroy each other. And third, a contract that was never just about money. Maya had landed in Dubai 3 years earlier, not by choice but by necessity. The war in Syria had already scattered her family. Her father, a professor of linguistics at Damascus University, had died in a bombing in 2015. He was the one who had insisted she learn languages, not just as a skill, but as a bridge. Words are the only tools that build without destroying, he used to say. Maya took those words to heart. By the time she was 18, she was fluent in 4 languages. By 21, she had a degree in linguistics from the American University of Beirut, graduating at the top of her class. Everyone expected her to become a diplomat, a translator for the United Nations, something that matched her promise. But life had other plans. Her mother, Layla, was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer 6 months after graduation. The treatment was brutal. Chemotherapy, surgeries, medications that cost more per month than most people earned in a year. The Lebanese healthcare system could only do so much. Specialists were in Dubai, so Maya packed a single suitcase, kissed her mother goodbye, and flew to the Emirates with nothing but her degree and a determination that bordered on desperation. She applied to dozens of positions: translation agencies, corporate offices, government departments. Each time she heard the same refrain: not enough experience, wrong nationality, overqualified. The Gulf job market was a labyrinth of connections and privilege, and Maya had neither. So she did what refugees and immigrants have done for centuries. She took the job nobody else wanted: waiting tables. The Al Maha restaurant sat on the 36th floor of the Burj Al Arab's nearest rival, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that catered to the wealthiest 1% of the planet. Dinner for 2 could easily exceed $5,000. The wine list alone was thicker than most university textbooks, and the clientele was a rotating cast of sheikhs, oligarchs, tech moguls, and royalty who expected to be served by people they would never remember. Maya learned to move through this world like a ghost, efficient, invisible, forgettable. She memorized the menu in all 4 languages. She could recommend wine pairings to French diplomats and explain spice levels to Saudi princes. Her tips were generous, and almost every dirham went straight to her mother's medical bills. But the job was also a constant reminder of what she had lost. Every night, she watched billionaires sign deals on napkins, negotiate mergers between courses, and celebrate acquisitions with champagne that cost more than her monthly rent. She was smart enough to understand the conversations happening around her. She just was not supposed to be part of them. On the night of November 7th, everything changed. The private dining room on the 40th floor had been reserved for a meeting that the management described only as extremely sensitive. The reservation came from Tariq Al-Rashid's office, and if that name does not ring a bell, you need to know who this man was. Tariq Al-Rashid was not just a billionaire. He was the founder and chairman of Al-Rashid Energy, a petroleum conglomerate that controlled nearly 8% of the Middle East's oil refining capacity. His net worth was estimated at $7.3 billion. He owned islands. He owned politicians. and he owned a reputation for doing whatever it took to win. Al-Rashid had grown up in the slums of eastern Abu Dhabi, the son of a fisherman who died at sea when Tariq was 12. He built his empire from nothing, scrapping and clawing his way through the oil markets of the 1980s and 90s. His business tactics were legendary. He once bankrupted a competitor by buying their debt and calling it in on the same day their largest refinery exploded. He was charming, ruthless, and utterly convinced that morality was a luxury for those who could afford it. Across the table that night sat a man who could not have been more different. David Cohen was 61, a third-generation Israeli industrialist whose family had been building things since long before the State of Israel existed. Cohen Industries specialized in desalination technology, turning seawater into drinking water on a massive scale. Their patented process was the most efficient in the world, capable of producing fresh water at half the cost of any competitor. And sitting on the table between these two titans was a proposal that could reshape the Middle East. The deal was this. Al-Rashid Energy wanted to acquire exclusive rights to Cohen's desalination technology for the entire Gulf region. In exchange, Cohen would receive a 40% stake in a new joint venture, plus access to Al-Rashid's distribution networks across 12 countries. The numbers were staggering. The initial contract was worth $600 million. Over the next decade, the partnership could generate upwards of $40 billion. This was not just a business deal, it was a geopolitical realignment. An Arab oil giant and an Israeli water technology company joining forces. But here is the thing about billion-dollar contracts. The devil is in the details, and those details are written in words. Words that can be twisted, manipulated, and weaponized if you have the right translator. Al-Rashid's office had specifically requested a server who spoke both Arabic and Hebrew. They claimed it was for efficiency, someone who could facilitate the conversation without the need for multiple translators hovering around. The restaurant manager, eager to please his most important client, thought immediately of Maya. She was pulled aside just minutes before the meeting. "You speak Hebrew, yes, and Arabic, of course. Mr. Al-Rashid needs someone to help with translation. Just basic terms. There is an extra $500 in it for you." $500 was a month of her mother's medication. Maya did not hesitate. When she entered the private dining room, the atmosphere was already thick with tension. Al-Rashid sat at the head of the table, flanked by two lawyers. Cohen sat opposite, alone except for a single aide. Between them lay a document 37 pages long, the deal of a lifetime condensed into clauses and subclauses. Maya stood near the side table, ready to serve wine and translate as needed. The first 20 minutes were cordial. Al-Rashid complimented Cohen's technology. Cohen acknowledged Al-Rashid's market reach. They discussed the broad strokes while Maya quietly translated the pleasantries back and forth. She was good at this. Her father's training, all those years of drilling vocabulary and accent reduction, was finally being used for something beyond taking dinner orders. Then the conversation shifted to the financial terms, and that was when it happened. Al-Rashid leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Cohen's face. He spoke in rapid Arabic, far too fast for the Israeli to follow. "This section here, regarding the revenue split, tell him it says 30% equity, not 40, and the upfront payment, reduce it by 50 million. Tell him the original Hebrew draft had a translation error." He slipped a folded piece of paper across the table toward Maya, not directly, but sliding it beneath a napkin. "Do this correctly," he whispered in Arabic, "and there will be a lot more than $500 waiting for you, enough to solve all your problems." Maya's blood turned to ice. She looked at the paper. It was a diagram. On one side, the actual contract terms. On the other, the false translation he wanted her to deliver. The difference was $30 million. Al-Rashid was asking her to deliberately mistranslate the deal, to cheat Cohen out of a fortune, and to do it while looking him straight in the eye. The room was silent. Cohen waited, his expression patient. Al-Rashid watched Maya like a hawk. Her hands trembled. She could hear her father's voice in her head, telling her that words build without destroying. She could see her mother's face, gaunt from chemotherapy but still hopeful. She could feel the weight of a decision that would define who she really was. And then she opened her mouth to speak. She looked Al-Rashid straight in the eye, and then she turned to Cohen and spoke in perfect Hebrew. Mr. Cohen, the terms Mr. Al-Rashid just relayed are not what is written in the contract. He has asked me to tell you the equity is 30%, not 40%. He also asked me to reduce the upfront payment by $50 million and to claim the original draft contained a translation error. Her voice did not waver. There is no error. Trying to cheat you. The silence that followed was absolute. David Cohen set down his pen. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to something cold and precise. He did not look at Maya, he looked at Al-Rashid. Is this true? Al-Rashid's face was a mask of practiced calm, but beneath it fury boiled. He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. This is absurd. A waitress who speaks a few words of Hebrew thinks she understands a $600 million contract. Cohen, you cannot seriously entertain this. He gestured toward Maya as if swatting a fly. She misunderstood. My actual offer is generous enough. But Maya did not retreat. She reached beneath the napkin and produced the folded paper Al-Rashid had secretly slid toward her. She unfolded it, revealing the two columns, one with the real figures, one with the faked ones, and placed it on the table in front of Cohen. This is what he gave me, a written instruction to lie. One of Al-Rashid's lawyers lunged forward to snatch the paper, but Cohen's hand was faster. He studied the document for 3 seconds, and those 3 seconds changed everything. He looked at the numbers, at the handwritten notes in Arabic, at the damning clarity of the deception. Then he folded the paper again and slipped it into his jacket pocket. I have seen enough, he said quietly. Al-Rashid stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the marble floor. You will regret this, he said, but he was not looking at Cohen. He was looking at Maya. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Then he turned on his heel and walked out, his lawyers scrambling behind him. The private dining room suddenly felt enormous and empty. Cohen remained seated. He gestured for Maya to sit across from him. You just threw away a very large bribe, he said. You could have taken his money, delivered the false translation, and no one would have ever known except you and him. Why didn't you? Maya's hands were still shaking. My father used to say that words build without destroying. If I had bent my words to cheat you, I would have destroyed something in myself that no amount of money could rebuild. She paused. Also, my mother is dying of cancer. Every dollar I have goes to her treatment, but she did not raise a liar. Cohen studied her for a long moment. He was a man who had survived wars, built a company from the ground up, and navigated the treacherous waters of Middle Eastern business for decades. He knew character when he saw it. What is your name? Maya Haddad. Maya Haddad, he repeated, as if memorizing it. You are a linguist, a translator by training. I have a degree in linguistics from the American University of Beirut. I speak 4 languages, and yet you are waiting tables. My mother's medical bills do not wait for the right job to appear. Cohen nodded slowly. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card. I am not going to offer you a reward because what you did was not a transaction, but I am going to offer you an interview. My company is expanding across the region. We need a cultural liaison, someone who understands languages, yes, but more importantly, someone who understands people, someone with integrity. He slid the card across the table. Call my office tomorrow. The salary will cover your mother's treatments and then some. Maya stared at the card. David Cohen, Chairman, Cohen Industries, a phone number in Tel Aviv, an email address. I do not know what to say. Say you will call, he replied, and for the first time that evening he smiled. You saved me $30 million tonight. More importantly, you saved me from a partnership with a man who would have bled me dry over the next decade. The least I can do is offer you a job. Maya pocketed the card. She finished her shift that night in a daze, clearing plates and refilling glasses while the other servers whispered about the commotion in the private room. The management asked her what happened, and she told them the truth, or part of it. She said there had been a disagreement over contract terms. She did not mention the bribe, the threat, or the job offer. She was not sure she believed it herself. When she finally got home to her small apartment in Deira, well past midnight, she called her mother in Beirut. Layla's voice was weak but still warm. Maya told her everything. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a long moment before her mother spoke. Your father would be so proud of you, she said. Now, my daughter, you must be careful. Men like Al-Rashid do not forget humiliation. Her mother's warning proved prophetic. 2 days later, Maya received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was low and measured. "You made a mistake, Miss Haddad, a very expensive mistake. Mr. Al-Rashid is willing to let it go if you sign a statement saying you misunderstood the situation. Absent-minded, language barrier, simple confusion." The voice paused. "If you do not, things will become difficult for you." Maya's heart pounded. Who is this? A friend, someone who wants to help you avoid unnecessary trouble. Think about your mother. She needs you. She needs the money you earn. If you cannot work in Dubai anymore, where will she be? Sign the paper. Everyone moves on. Maya hung up. She did not sleep that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her father's words echoing in her head. She thought about signing the statement. It would be so easy. Al-Rashid would retreat. The threats would stop. She could go back to being invisible, a waitress with a dying mother and no power. But then she thought about Cohen, about the way he had looked at her with respect rather than pity. She thought about the card in her purse. And she thought about what it would mean to let a man like Al-Rashid win, to let him cheat and threaten his way through the world without consequence. The next morning, she did not call Al-Rashid's people. She called David Cohen's office. What she did not know was that Al-Rashid had already moved to Plan B within hours of the failed negotiation. He had activated a network of contacts that stretched from Dubai to Beirut, from business regulators to local police. He was not just a billionaire. He was a man who had spent decades building a machine designed to protect his interests. And that machine was now aimed directly at Maya. The first sign of the attack came when Maya arrived for her shift at Al Maha the following week. The restaurant manager, a nervous man named Farouk who had always treated her with distant politeness, called her into his office. His face was pale. "Maya, I am so sorry, we have to let you go." "What? Why?" Farouk would not meet her eyes. "Management says there was a complaint. A customer claims you were rude, unprofessional. It is nonsense, I know, but the complaint came from someone with influence. I have no choice." Maya did not need to ask who that someone was. She collected her final paycheck and walked out into the Dubai sun, the city's gleaming towers suddenly feeling like the bars of a cage. That evening, her phone lit up with messages from friends in Beirut. One of them had been visited by a man asking questions about Maya's family. Another friend said that a government official had suddenly cancelled her mother's visa extension, citing irregularities. The bureaucratic walls were closing in. Al-Rashid was not just trying to silence her. He was trying to collapse her entire world. Then, a single email landed in her inbox from an address she did not recognize. It was a forwarded message, originally sent from Al-Rashid's assistant to a contact in the Lebanese Ministry of Interior. The subject line was 2 words: "Make her mother's situation difficult." Below it, a series of instructions designed to cancel Layla's medical visa, seize her remaining savings, and leave her with no legal standing in Lebanon. Maya stared at the screen, her blood running cold. Someone inside Al-Rashid's operation was leaking information. She had no idea who or why, but the message was clear. She was not the only one fighting back, and the battle was just beginning. The leaked email changed everything. Maya read it again, her hands trembling not from fear now, but from something closer to fury. Someone inside Al-Rashid's inner circle had risked their own safety to warn her. She did not know why, but she knew what it meant. The man who had tried to bribe her was now trying to destroy her mother, and he was not going to stop. She forwarded the email to David Cohen's office that same night, along with a simple message. "This is what they are doing to my family. I don't know who sent it to me, but I need help." Cohen called her back within 30 minutes. His voice was steady but urgent. "I am sending a lawyer to Beirut tonight. Your mother will have protection. As for you, I need you to stay calm and stay in Dubai. Do not go back to your apartment. I will have someone pick you up in an hour." Maya packed a small bag, passport, savings, a photograph of her parents, and waited. The car that arrived was driven by a security contractor named Raymai, a former Israeli intelligence officer who spoke Arabic with the soft accent of a Palestinian from Haifa. He did not ask questions. He drove her to a safe apartment in the Marina district, a location Cohen kept for visiting executives. "You will be safe here," Raymai said. "Do not use your phone except to call me or Mr. Cohen. Al-Rashid's people are watching the airports and the borders. The next few days will be critical." Maya spent the first night alone, staring out at the Persian Gulf, wondering how her life had turned so fast. 24 years old, a linguistics graduate who had only wanted to help her mother, and now she was in hiding while two billionaires maneuvered around her like she was a chess piece. But the next morning brought a revelation that turned the chessboard upside down. Raymai returned with a thick folder. Inside were documents that Cohen's investigators had assembled in just 48 hours. "This is not new behavior for Al-Rashid," Raymai explained. "He has been doing this for years. Bribing translators, accountants, middle managers, anyone who could tilt a deal in his favor. He usually succeeds because his targets take the money and stay silent." He opened the folder to a photograph of a woman in her 50s, a Jordanian translator named Samira Haddad, no relation to Maya, but the name made her heart skip. This woman worked on a deal between Al-Rashid and a German energy firm in 2018. She refused a bribe and reported him to the authorities in Berlin. 3 weeks later, her son was arrested on fabricated drug charges in Dubai. He served 2 years before the case was overturned. Maya stared at the photograph. What happened to her? She still lives in Berlin, but she never worked in the Middle East again. She agreed to speak with us. She says Al-Rashid operates with total impunity because he owns too many people in too many governments. Every time someone tries to expose him, he buries them in legal threats, visa revocations, or worse. And then Raymai dropped the bigger bombshell. "There is more. The leak that sent you that email, we tracked it." The message came from Al-Rashid's personal legal assistant, a woman named Nadia. She has been feeding information to a journalist for months. She wants to bring him down from the inside. Maya felt the ground shift beneath her. She was not alone. There was an entire underground network of people who had been hurt by Al-Rashid, and they were finally coordinating. "What does she want from me?" "She wants you to go public," Raymai said. "Your story is different. You are a waitress with no power, no political ties, no reason to lie. You have David Cohen backing you. If you tell the world what happened in that restaurant, it will be the match that lights the fire." The next 48 hours were a blur of encrypted calls and secret meetings. Cohen flew into Dubai under a false name, renting an entire floor of a private office building near the DIFC Financial Center. He brought with him a team, a British crisis communications expert, a Swiss lawyer specializing in international fraud, and a reporter from a major global news network who had been tracking Al-Rashid's deals for 2 years. "We have been waiting for the right moment," the reporter explained. Her name was Elena. "I have documented evidence of 7 separate bribery incidents involving Al-Rashid over the past decade. But every time I got close, the victims backed down. They were too afraid. You, Maya, are the first one who refused the bribe and is willing to speak publicly. With your testimony, we can finally expose him." Maya listened, her mind racing. She thought about the risks. Her mother, still weak from chemo, now under protection in Beirut, but still vulnerable. Her friends, some of whom had already been questioned by Al-Rashid's operatives. Her own future. If she went public, she might never be able to return to the Arab world. She would be branded a traitor, a tool of Israeli interests. Al-Rashid's propaganda machine would paint her as a spy. But then she thought about Samira, the translator whose son was framed. She thought about all the other victims, the ones who took the bribes out of fear and spent the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. She thought about her father, who believed words could build without destroying. Staying silent would not build anything. It would only protect the man who had tried to destroy her. "I will do it," Maya said, "but we do it my way." The plan came together over the next 3 days. Elena's network would release a coordinated set of stories. First, an anonymous leak of the contract documents and Al-Rashid's handwritten bribe instructions. Then, interviews with 2 previous victims who had now agreed to speak. And finally, an on-camera interview with Maya, the waitress who had refused to be bought. The first story broke on a Thursday morning. By noon, Al-Rashid's name was trending across every major news platform. The Dubai Stock Exchange suspended trading in Al-Rashid energy shares after they dropped 22% in 2 hours. The UAE government, embarrassed by the international attention, released a statement saying they were reviewing the allegations. But Al-Rashid did not go quietly. His legal team filed emergency injunctions in 3 countries. His public relations firm planted stories calling Maya a scorned employee seeking revenge. He dredged up old social media posts from friends of friends trying to paint her as a radical. None of it landed. The handwritten note, verified by 3 independent forensic analysts, was too damning. The pattern of past victims now emerging from the shadows was too consistent. Then came the interview. Maya sat in a darkened studio, a single camera light on her face. She spoke calmly, deliberately, her 4 languages reduced to 1 as she told the story to a global audience. "I am not a hero," she said. "I am just someone who could not live with the alternative. He thought he could buy my silence because I was poor, because I was desperate, because I was invisible. But being invisible does not mean you have no voice." The interview aired on a Friday evening. By Saturday morning, the video had been viewed 80 million times. Protests erupted outside Al Rashid's properties in London and Paris. The board of Al Rashid Energy held an emergency meeting and voted to suspend their chairman pending an internal investigation. The UAE Attorney General announced a formal inquiry into allegations of fraud and corruption. But the story was not over. The biggest twist was still unfolding. Nadia, the legal assistant who had leaked the email, had given Alina something else: evidence that Al Rashid's bribery network extended far beyond the business world. It reached into governments, into regulatory agencies, into the very institutions that were now supposed to investigate him. If those institutions were compromised, the entire investigation could be sabotaged before it even began. Maya and her allies realized they needed a different kind of pressure, not just legal, but political and public. They needed to expose the system that had protected Al Rashid for so long. And that meant going after the enablers, not just the man himself. The stage was set for the final act. David Cohen looked at Maya across the conference table, the same man whose contract she had saved, now fully invested in the battle. "You have already done more than anyone could ask," he said, "but if you want to finish this, we need to take the fight to the next level. Are you ready?" Maya did not hesitate. "I did not come this far to let him win." The days that followed were not a battle, they were an avalanche. Once Nadia's evidence went public, the investigation spread like a virus. Within a week, the UAE's Attorney General announced that a special task force would probe Al Rashid Energy's contracts dating back to 2012. 3 more former employees came forward. A retired British judge, hired by Cohen's legal team, released a preliminary report detailing 14 instances of documented bribery across 6 countries. Al Rashid, once untouchable, suddenly found himself cornered in his own palace. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Alina, the journalist, had been tracing the money trails for months. She discovered that the bribes were not just cash in envelopes. They were routed through a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and the British Virgin Islands, all linked to a single holding entity in the Channel Islands. That entity, named Crescent Trust Holdings, had a board of directors that included a retired British minister, a Swiss private banker, and a former head of customs for one of the Gulf states. The network was not just criminal, it was systemic. When Alina published the names, the British minister resigned within hours. The Swiss bank froze the accounts. The Gulf official was placed under house arrest. Al Rashid, now stripped of his board chairmanship and facing extradition requests from Germany and Switzerland, did something nobody expected. He requested a private meeting with Maya. The message came through Rami, the security contractor. Al Rashid was in Dubai, confined to his estate under travel ban. He wanted to speak with her in person, alone. Maya's first instinct was refusal, but then she remembered her father's words. Words build bridges. Perhaps this was one bridge that needed to be built, not for reconciliation but for closure. She agreed on one condition: the conversation would be recorded. They met in a sterile conference room at a government building, lawyers and security guards standing outside. Al Rashid looked diminished. His tailored suit hung a little looser, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. He did not offer threats now, he offered something else. "I am not here to ask for forgiveness," he said, his voice hoarse. "I am here to give you something that will finish what you started." He slid a USB drive across the table. "This contains records of every bribe I ever paid, every official I corrupted, every deal I stole. Names, dates, amounts, it is my entire ledger. I have nothing left to lose, but maybe my sons will one day understand that their father was not entirely a monster. Maya stared at the drive. Why give this to me? Why not to the prosecutors? Because you were the only one who never wanted anything from me except the truth. The prosecutors will cut deals, they will protect their own. But you are different. You will make sure the world sees it. She took the drive. She did not thank him. She stood up and left the room, the weight of a man's entire corrupt legacy now resting in her hand. That evening, she handed the drive to Alina. The news that followed was seismic. The ledger named 47 public officials across 12 countries, including 3 sitting ministers and a European Parliament member. The World Bank launched an integrity review of all contracts involving Al Rashid Energy. The company was eventually dissolved, its assets auctioned to competitors who agreed to new transparency standards. Al Rashid himself was sentenced to 10 years in a Dubai prison after pleading guilty to reduced charges, a fraction of what many felt he deserved. But his empire was gone. For Maya, the personal transformation was quieter but more profound. David Cohen flew her to Tel Aviv for the promised interview. She sat with his human resources team for 3 hours, explaining her qualifications, her experiences, her vision for bridging cultures. At the end, they offered her the position of Director of Cross-Cultural Partnerships, a role Cohen created specifically for her. The salary was $140,000 a year, plus full medical benefits that covered her mother's treatments in a specialized clinic near Jerusalem. Layla's cancer went into remission 6 months later. Maya's younger brother, Youssef, who had been working odd jobs in Beirut, was able to enroll in university. The family that war and poverty had scattered was finally beginning to heal. But Maya did not stop there. Using her newfound platform, she established a foundation dedicated to protecting whistleblowers in the Middle East and North Africa. She called it the Haddad Initiative, named after her father. It provided legal aid, relocation assistance, and financial support to people like the Jordanian translator Samira, whose son's wrongful imprisonment had failed to break her spirit. Samira became the foundation's first board member. Together, they created a network of safe houses and pro bono lawyers that stretched from Casablanca to Muscat. Within 2 years, the initiative had helped over 200 individuals expose corruption without losing everything. Because here is the part of the story that often goes untold. The system that enabled Al Rashid did not vanish when he went to prison. The shell companies, the bribed officials, the loopholes, they are still there, waiting for the next opportunist. Maya knew this. She knew that her single act of courage was not a solution, it was merely a spark. The real work was in building structures that made integrity easier than corruption. That work consumed her. She spoke at the United Nations, testified before the European Parliament, and advised governments on anti-corruption legislation. She became, in her own way, the diplomat her father had always imagined she would become. One final detail, though, stunned even Maya. When the investigative files on Al Rashid were unsealed, they contained a document that had been overlooked in the chaos. It was an internal memo from Al Rashid's office, dated 3 weeks before the fateful dinner. In it, he had explicitly instructed his staff to find a bilingual waitress at the restaurant who could serve as a translator. He had identified Maya by name 2 weeks before she ever walked into that room. The entire scenario, the need for a translator, the bribe attempt, every variable had been carefully arranged. He had chosen her because her background made her vulnerable and because her language skills made her useful. He had treated her as a tool for his manipulation from the very start. And yet, that manipulation had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. The very qualities he had tried to exploit, her poverty, her desperation, her pride in her languages, became the weapons that destroyed him. Maya's integrity was not something he could have predicted, because in his world everyone had a price. He had never met someone who valued words more than money. That miscalculation cost him everything. It is a truth as old as power itself. The powerful never see their downfall coming from the people they have dismissed. And for Maya, the lesson was simpler. No one is invisible, and no one is powerless. Sometimes, the person holding the wine tray is holding your entire future in their hands. Maya had never set out to become a global symbol of integrity. She wanted only to save her mother, to use the languages her father had given her, to survive with her soul intact. But the world does not always let good people remain small. Sometimes it pushes them into rooms they were never meant to enter and asks them to choose between silence and truth. Maya chose truth, and that choice rippled outward in ways she never could have predicted. Al-Rashid's empire crumbled. The officials he corrupted were exposed. The victims he silenced finally had their voices amplified. But the real legacy of what happened in that Dubai restaurant is not measured in dollars or prison sentences. It is measured in the hundreds of whistleblowers who now have a network to protect them, in the policies that were rewritten to prevent future abuses, in the unspectacular daily courage of people who decide that their dignity is not for sale. It is easy to believe that one person cannot make a difference. It is seductive to think that the powerful will always win, that the systems are too entrenched, that integrity is a luxury reserved for those who can afford it. Maya's story dismantles that lie. Because here is the unsettling truth. For every Maya who steps forward, there are hundreds who stay silent. For every bribe that is exposed, there are thousands that go undetected. The machinery of corruption does not merely exist in the shadows, it thrives in the mundane complicity of people who look the other way. And that is the lingering question this story leaves us with. If you had been standing in that restaurant, holding that note, facing the threat of losing everything, what would you have done? It is a question that deserves an honest answer, because situations like Maya's are not as rare as we pretend. They happen in boardrooms and back offices, in government buildings and restaurant kitchens, every single day. The only difference is that most of the time, nobody hears about them. So the next time you witness something that does not sit right, remember the waitress who refused a fortune because her father taught her that words build without destroying. Remember that the powerful are only invincible until someone refuses to play by their rules. And remember that heroism does not require a cape. It requires only a steady voice and the refusal to let fear write the final line. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories of courage and integrity from around the world. And wherever you are watching from, drop a comment and let us know, when was a moment you had to choose between what was easy and what was right? We read every single one. Thank you for watching.